All right, my friends, welcome. Give it a minute to let some people jump in. A couple minutes early here. If you are here, I'd love in the chat. You should see the chat. I'd love to know who you are because I can only see visitors. I can only see people watching. I can't see names. Cons of using YouTube versus Zoom. But I'd love in the chat if you could put who you are and where you're from. That'd be great. Gym name. Sure, I recognize quite a few of the folks that are going to be jumping in here. Excited for this topic. Pin fit. Luke, good to see you, man. Good to see you. All right. So as we're getting rolling here, I'll mention this a few times. The document, if you go to Wealthy, I'll put it in the chat too, but wealthygymowners.com/fix. wealthygymowners.com/fix. You will be able to grab the document that I'm going to outline today. That way you can have some notes. Of course, if you want to take your own notes, that'd be up to you. But there's that in the chat for you. All right. We are good to go. So let's see here. Got this doc. See a couple of you already picked up the Google Doc. Nice and quick. I like that. All right. So let's get rolling. I know I sent this out to my social list, so I'm sure there are some people that maybe have shared it with other gyms or things like that. And this is now on YouTube land, so who knows who's going to see this. For those that don't know me, I started Sperling Fitness back in 2012, ran it for 12 years. At our peak, we had just shy 386, I think was the highest client count we hit, just shy of 400. Always wanted 400 clients, never hit it. Kind of one of those arbitrary goals. But kind of your cliche 7-figure gym. We had 10 or 11 team members at the peak and sold that location in actually just about a year ago at this point to my long-term friend and now business partner. He was the manager. I started out as an intern, then coach, then head coach, then manager. He bought that location from me about a year ago, like I said. And so I was quote away from the game for a year. Now, not really, because as many of you know, Pat Rigsby and I are partners. And I started out as a student of his way back, became a coach of his. And now we've partnered for the last year to start Wealthy Gym Owners. And Wealthy Gym Owners, I really created it. I don't want to be one of those cliche gurus. I created it as a way to make sure we're attracting gym owners who, yes, they want to scale. Yes, they want to get bigger. But I have a huge passion for making sure you build wealth outside of your gym as well, hence the name. I've done that through short-term rentals. We have 12 short-term rentals, 15 million bucks in value. Funny enough, the stock market's in a quote crash right now as we're live. I'm thankful that the majority of my net worth is in real estate. And so I think the gym can be a great vehicle for building your cash flow. But a great reminder, one of my favorite lines is the gym business is a cash flow business, not a cash out business. I sold my business for over 7 figures, but I couldn't retire on that, right? And there's not many gyms selling for multiple 7 figures unless you're a big chain. So long story short, that's kind of, why we created Wealthy Gym Owners and why I do the trainings, why I put out the content is, yes, I want you to have a successful gym, but I want to teach you strategies also where you can pull that cash out, invest it, and build wealth outside of here. So you can certainly check out, if you're new to me, You can check out wealthygymowners.com. You'll see there in the chat, wealthygymowners.com/fix is where you can grab the training document from today. But also just wealthygymowners.com. We got free podcasts, free book. You'll see the book. Where am I? Right there. You can grab that book for free. And that has a whole bunch of stuff of how to build a highly profitable gym. So let's get rolling on Fix Your Facility. Hopefully my sharing of the screen works okay. And if not, then all right. So you should be able to see that. And we're going to dive right in. So I see a couple of you are already on the doc. If you hadn't had a chance to grab it, again, wealthygymowners.com/fix. So let's cover a couple notes before we dive into the content. Okay. This is a pretty comprehensive list of things that I think you can do within your facility to update it. Now, not all of this, but a lot of it is going to require some money, right? It's going to require some money to update things. So I want you to keep that in mind that, this is a list. This is not I need to do this tomorrow. And all of this is not going to be possible for many of you, right? I mean, we might have folks in here doing 5 or 10 grand a month. And I know for a fact, based upon a couple of names I saw, we have folks doing 50, 60, 70, 80 plus $1,000 a month in revenue. And so obviously from a cash flow perspective, the larger the business, the more cash you should have on hand to make some of these changes. But there's certainly a ton of small stuff as well that anybody can do. But just understand that, this is you're not gonna be able to do all of this, right? So I understand that some of this requires a financial investment. So take this in stages, okay? Also, especially on the exterior side of things in this presentation, there may be some limits based upon your lease or your landlord restrictions, okay? Meaning if you lease your space, you may not be able to touch the outside, or I may have an idea where you're not going to be able to implement that idea because it's a restriction in your lease or your landlord does not approve it, okay? So why fix your facility? Okay, so we're going to talk about design, we're going to talk about colors, we're going to talk about layout. In my opinion, if we were sitting here let's just use pre-COVID. I know it's an overused term, but just for time stamping things. If we're sitting here 2018, 2019, I don't know how much this stuff matters, right? Because Facebook ads are still cranking. There's not a ton, relatively speaking, of training gyms around. So as long as you offer like good quality coaching, we don't typically struggle with standing out from health clubs, right? Health clubs are such to the consumer, such a drastically different model. As soon as they understand that, hey, we're going to have a coach with you at every single workout, boom, health club differentiator. But now in the landscape of today, where we have all these, what I consider to be training gyms, right? Even though you and I, as industry people, know they're different. I'm talking about the Orange Theories, the burn boot camps, the metabolics. I mean, alloys, like they're all great in certain ways, right? So how's that now, by the way, in the chat? Apparently I can't go onto that tab. Can you see now? There we go. So let me, good to go now. I see why, because I just shared the tab. I got to share the whole window. Thanks for the, whoa, that's messy. How's that? Let me know in the chat if you can see that. Let me know in the chat if you can see this when I flop between the two tabs. I can't see the chat if I go onto this tab. Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to assume this works then. Luke, do me a favor. Text me again if it doesn't work. First time on YouTube. So the not first time, but first time live streaming. So anyways, the as far as the competition, we know the competition is stricter, but I have a belief, and hopefully you can adopt this belief, that The consumer doesn't understand the difference between an Orange Theory, an F45, a Metabolic, a Burn Boot Camp, and your training gym. They just don't. As much as I want the messaging to be there, as much as I want everything else to be, show us indifferent, frankly, like, I mean, I remember with our first location, we used to get comments all the time about, are you CrossFit? And it was only because they walked in and they saw a rig, they saw barbells, they saw medicine balls, right? And so again, I think 2017, 2018, 2019, none of this mattered. And now it's like, okay, well, if these franchises are coming in and putting literally hundreds of thousands of dollars into their build out, I think it's super important that we update our facilities to stay competitive. Okay. So let's break it down to things to consider / clarify before we make changes, right? So I don't want you to make any of these changes until you are super clear on these three things. Okay. Number one is, who is your ideal client? And I know that's like, oh yeah, we've heard that 100 times. I know that, but put it through the lens of design. Let's take, I know Luke's on here. Luke works with a 50 to 60 plus year old, typically injured, very affluent in Scottsdale, Arizona. As opposed to, I know I saw some names on here that I would consider to be more like the busy mom, right? They're a little bit younger, more like weekend warrior type folks. The aesthetic, the intimidation factor, think of, I'm going to show you some non-industry examples in a minute. Think of, how does the person that Luke trains, 70-year-old grandmother, low back pain, etc. What does her house look like at home compared to the 45-year-old soccer mom? Right? I'm guessing design-wise, quite different. So when I pick things that when we get into this, I want you to run it through that filter, because things like, for example, if you work exclusively with women, or the majority of your clients are women, I believe little things like you'll see below, like I want you to provide hair ties, feminine products in the bathrooms. I want greenery in the lobby and in the bathrooms, because I want good lighting in the bathroom in case they're doing their makeup quick before work. That stuff matters. Okay. But if you're training the hardcore weekend warrior, you're more industrial, I don't know if I'd spend my money there. Right. So run through that filter of ideal client. Next thing I want you to have kind of jotted off to the side is, what are your brand colors? What are your brand colors? So you should have 2 to 4, no more than 4. If you have more than 4, then you don't have a set of brand colors, you have a rainbow. So we don't want that. We want 2 to 4 colors that are used exclusively throughout your brand. Typically, you have 2 that are more dominant. So I think my Louisville guys results down in Louisville, right? I hope I'm right, but I'm just looking at it from what I see on social. You use a ton of red and white, right? A ton of red and white. So those are your 2 dominant colors. Then potentially that's it. That's why I said 2. But then potentially you have like what I would consider to be your accent colors, right? Maybe you occasionally throw in a splash of yellow. Maybe you occasionally throw in, a light gray, right? 2 to 4. And everything, what I mean everything, and we'll see, we'll get to concrete examples. Everything are those colors, right? My flyers, my website, as much of my equipment as possible, all of my branding. Everybody knows the colors of the big franchises, right? I mean, Orange Theory is obvious because it's in their name, but look at Planet Fitness. Everybody knows purple and yellow. Everybody, right? Even if you look at like Alloy, right? A lot of us know Rick and what he's done with that franchise. It's starting to get to the point where everybody knows that Alloy is black and yellow, right? If you look at their facilities, everything is black and yellow. And so that is what you're competing against. That just looks strong compared to things being mismatched, I'm not sure your website's green, but then I see a flyer from you in town that's orange. It's like, we got to have all that stuff be cohesive. Okay. So we're going to map this out, but you need to first pick what are your brand colors. And then the third consideration I want you to make is what model / programming style do you run? And I put this last because you most likely already have this defined, but it's super important to take this into consideration, especially when we get to the interior layout side of things, right? The interior layout side of things, okay? Because if I'm running group training, my layout, which is traditionally more circuit-based, maybe you have 4 to 5 people doing the same thing at one time, as opposed to if you run semi-private or small group, you probably only have to manage 4 to 6 people, and you may at most have 2 or 3 people doing the same thing at one time. So equipment placement and equipment selection matter. Okay, so we'll get to that underneath the layout side, but those are my 3 considerations. Those are my 3 filters that I'm going through. Okay. So as we dig in, I know there's some new folks jumping in here. This doc you can access wealthygymowners.com/fix. Just plug your information in there and you'll grab this doc. And if you have questions, because I'm sharing my screen, I can't see the chat a ton. I can flip and go back and forth between it. But if you have questions, I'll scroll up after. We'll have plenty of time for Q&A. Okay. All right. So let's first look at other industries. I'm not trying to be rude here, but the fitness industry is pretty behind the game when it comes to a lot of stuff, right? They're usually slow to adopt. There's not as much big players, relatively speaking, in the space. And so we don't advance as fast as other industries. Okay. So I want to run through a couple examples before we get into specific tactics. When it comes to design, okay, I want you to think about real estate, right? I want you to think about your house or your apartment. A house is 4 walls, a roof, and some boxes inside, i.e. rooms, some sheetrock and some drywall, some studs and some sheetrock, a roof on it. And what makes your house stand out is things like the landscaping, things like the furnishings, what colors you paint the walls, the accents you choose to put up, right? The flooring that you choose. You take a house that has carpet and you take that same house and put in like an engineered hardwood or luxury vinyl plank, and it looks completely different, right? And so some of this is like, what's the trend? But also understand that for most of us, we lease or our building, for those of you that own your building, is usually a rectangle or a box. And you've chosen to put certain things inside of it. What we're auditing is what's inside of it. We don't need to worry about the 4 walls and a roof. Orange Theory, F45, they have 4 walls and a roof too, but they put different things inside of it. Okay. So let's look at retail with layout. Okay. Let's look at what the retail world does. Look at things like the Targets of the world. So I don't walk into a Target often, but I remember a couple times ago when I was in there, my wife's getting whatever diapers or some shit, and I'm paying attention to the employees that are walking around. And I noticed that this employee had this clipboard. And, me being me, I kind of was nosy and was like, what's this clipboard about? And it was a sketch of the end cap from corporate of what they wanted the end cap to look like. Right. So they had to, corporate, sends it out to all the Target locations. Hey, Easter's coming. This is what on aisle 14, your end cap needs to look like. So things like retail studies the foot traffic. Their cameras are for security, but they study the foot traffic of where do people walk in the store. So where do I want to place things that enhance the chance of them buying said things? So if I want to sell this one particular thing, I'm going to strategically place it where the most foot traffic is. They change it regularly Many of you, if I walked into your facility 5 years ago and I walk into it today, other than maybe some more dust and clutter, it looks the exact same. If you walked into that Target 5 years ago and you walk into it today, it looks completely different, right? It's newer, it's fresher, things are moved around. So even though they're selling the same items, largely speaking, it's constantly changing. They're thinking about placement. They're thinking about the floor plan. They're changing, they're updating layouts, all of that, right? And then the final one, our favorite, is Disney. So if you've never had the torture/pleasure of going to Disney, you know that if you pay attention, there are, and I'm just covering the bare bones basics here, there are tons of choices that they take into consideration. Things like your music choice. Now, I know for many of us, music is a pain point because it's playing in the background, it becomes white noise, and we forget about it. But we have to remember that for a client, they're only with you 45 to 50 minutes of that day. They walk in, and other than the radio in their car, maybe, that's the first time they're hearing music that day. And I don't know about you, but when I work out, I like music. But because you're not actively working out, the music becomes white noise. But to them, it's motivation, it's emotion, it's energy. So if you look at Disney, when you walk around the different sections of a park, the music aligns with the theme of that section. It matches the energy of that section. So if I want a high energy, like that's why you see the more hit style sessions playing faster beat music, generational music. I mentioned, your ideal client earlier. I know for us at like 5:30 in the morning, it was like Frank Sinatra, because it was largely older clientele, right? The early morning go-getters. They wake up at 4 o'clock and they've already, had breakfast and coffee by 4:30. And Frank Sinatra is their jam. And so that's what they wanted to listen to. It wasn't about me. But if I had some hip hop stuff just playing in the background that I thought was cool, or my coaches thought were cool, that's a mismatch, right? That's a mismatch. All of that matters. Smells. Now, I took my son to baseball tryouts last night, and the first comment he made, it was like, indoor at a cage, and the first comment he made was, "This place smells." He literally never been there before. Walked in the door. It's an old mill building, and it's turf, rubber, and he's like, "Dad, this place stinks." So he's 7 years old. First thing he said about the setup was, "This place stinks." Now, again, he's 7. That doesn't matter. It's baseball. We know it stinks, whatever. But for us, working with largely in the training gym space, I'm making a safe assumption that you're working with a more affluent clientele. How does your place smell? Right? And you'll see below, I don't want you putting a bunch of fake stuff in there, because then people get all bugged out about that. But largely your smell comes back to your cleanliness, right? How clean is your space? And this is a stereotype, but generally speaking, women care a lot more about cleanliness than men. And I know we probably have exceptions to that rule, but largely speaking, if you work predominantly with women, you need to be 10 times pickier about your smell and your cleanliness than you think. And then the final thing I want to pull out, and we'll get into, again, specific tactics, but I like to start from the outside in of an industry, is entertainment during pain points. So if we think of Disney, y'all know that the lines are very long, right? 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour and a half. But if you look, every time you're in line, there's always entertainment. It could be like on the Winnie the Pooh ride, there's, while you're waiting, there's like, a kids section for the kids to play. There could be something on screens. There could be music playing. There's some type of entertainment during the pain points. So for us, what is that in between sets? That's why I think the stuff on the wall, which we'll get to, matters. Little things like, I'm a big fan of having your client lifetime visits, like how long clients have been with you, visits on the board, like clubs, right? 250 visits, 500 visits, 750 visits, etc. And this is where I try to put like myself in a client's shoes and say, if I'm doing a set and I need a minute and a half rest, and I'm standing there and everybody else is busy, I got nobody to talk to, I'm just going to kind of look around, and all of a sudden catches my eye that there's names under 500 visits, and there's 13 people listed under 500 visits, and I'm Susie and I just started a month ago and I'm feeling frustrated. What you don't know is in Susie's head right now is, holy crap, those people made it 500 visits, I can do that. And that's the magic of having entertainment displays. It's retention without you even knowing. Okay. All right. So we know franchises, and I'm using franchises because I think this topic they do very well. Right. You and I can argue about the programming, the lack of relationship building, etc. That's where I think you can compete with them on. But what you will not, I don't say you can't win, but what you will not see them do poorly is location, signage, branding, and scalability of equipment. So location, 99% of franchises are in Class A real estate. What does Class A mean? Nice, new, high-end, and high traffic. So if they're getting tons of traffic and you get no traffic, because that's all that we can afford for lease space, we now have to spend an enormous amount more marketing just to get break even with them from a standpoint of viewership. Signage. I had a client out in Indianapolis that I went and saw about a year ago, flew out there to visit him. And, I'd never been to his gym. And so I plug it in, land at the airport, get my car, plug it into the GPS and get there. And GPS says I'm there. Like I follow it. I pull into the parking lot. The GPS says I'm there. I'm like, where the heck is this place? Because this does not look like a gym. Right. And so I had to call him and I was like, dude, where is this place? Come to find out, it was in an industrial setting and there were two rows of buildings. Okay. And his gym was in the second row. So roadside was in front of me, but there was a second building behind that first row of buildings. Same address. It was like, a different suite number, but there was no signage to alert me that this gym was back there. You never are going to question when you plug in an address to a franchise, as long as it takes you to the right space, where it is. So good signage, good branding. And then the final thing is scalability of equipment. And this one's big when we get into equipment layout here in a few minutes. Scalability of equipment. Many of us, and I never really went through this stage, so I have a hard time relating to it because, for context, I trained clients for a decade, so I'm not a trainer. But I never really had a fascination with like cool equipment, and never really I like nice looking equipment, but I was never like, oh, that's that new tool that can do that exercise, and I need to try it. But I see it all the time. And I know I go to conferences and I see, the perform betters of the days where, these trainers are walking out with, forklifts of new equipment. And I'm like, there's no scalability of certain pieces of equipment. What I mean by that is if you have a piece of equipment that can only do one thing, like one exercise, this piece of equipment does this one exercise, I would highly encourage you to get rid of it. Because it's going to take up square footage, which is extremely limited for us. And unless you're doing one-on-one training, I can only have one client doing that, or I need 7 of them, 8 of them, 10 of them, as opposed to that's where like the CrossFits of the world popularize things like dumbbells, kettlebells, medicine balls, bands, all of that stuff, if you think about it, was been around forever, but it was never really popularized till it got brought to the industry that, hey, this thing can do 100 different exercises. So any piece of equipment that I have in my facility can do multiple things, and it is scalable from a space perspective. So an example that could do multiple things but is not scalable is a cable machine, the traditional cable, like a dual cable stack machine. So think about that for a minute. One, they're very expensive. Two, even though they can do a ton of exercises, I can only fit two people at most on one tower. So if I'm running, any type of group training or any type of small group, I'm probably going to need multiple. And they're big. They take up a lot of square footage. So financially and square footage wise, they're not super scalable. That's where you see things like bands, or I think a great one that I've heard of, and I have no affiliate with them, that I've heard great about is the Anchor. Right, it mounts right to the rack. It can do your cable stuff, and it takes up this much room, and it's $600 as opposed to $3,000. So taking into account equipment selection, largely speaking, it's kind of like your house. You have too much clutter, and again, take a house. It's got the same stuff in it. One's clean and organized. The other one's cluttered. Same house. Which one's going to sell faster in pictures? Which one is going to appraise higher? Appraisers aren't supposed to take that into consideration. I guarantee you subconsciously, if they go to appraise a house that's dirty and they tomorrow appraise the same house that's clean, they're going to put that with a higher value. It's just the nature of human perception. All right. So let's break down exterior. And by the way, again, if you have questions on this stuff, drop it in the chat and I'll flip back over to that once we are done. So let's start exterior in. So this is the section where, again, some of this may or may not be possible based upon your lease/landlord relationship. So number one, you'll see this in every section. It's got to be clean. I don't want cigarette butts outside. If it's this time of year in New England, we're just getting out of snow and winter and salt and sand, and just it can be really kind of gross looking without a spring cleanup, right? So nice and clean. Parking, is parking clear? For example, line striping, like where you have lines painted, is super cheap. Trust me, I do it in my parking lot. The paving's expensive, but line striping, we're talking a couple $100, right? Maybe a couple thousand if you got a big parking lot. That makes a big difference. Do I have a clear spot to park? Can I negotiate with my landlord that I have reserved spots if parking is an issue? Landscaping, does it present well? Is it greenery? Think of, again, the Class A real estate. Glass. So my first space that I leased was in a warehouse, and the door to it was a solid metal door, no glass. So at the time, we're talking 2012 here. I was 22 years old. I didn't think anything of it. I was like, cool. Warehouse space, open, high ceilings, love it. What probably hurt me, and again, did it like kill the long term of my business? No. But I guarantee you there are people that were afraid to go in the beginning because I don't know what's behind that door. How much in the retail world is window shopping? It's a huge part of the retail world, window shopping. If you walk downtown in your downtown area, there are people just walking by looking in the windows. I have a buddy that is an artist, and a large part of his work is painting those windows for retail businesses, like putting, design on them, or they'll stage those windows. They'll do window decals, things like that. So if you have a solid door where you can't see in, how many people are hesitating to come in because they can't see what's on the inside? Or think of a new client's anxiety. New client, day one, meeting with you for a success session, never met you before, never been in your space before. And they show up, parking's not clear, looks a little grungy, looks a little dirty, and the door's solid. They can't see in. They're literally going in blind. How high is their anxiety? And does that factor into close rate? If I'm a betting man, I'm at least starting up in the negative, right? I'm starting in the negative because they're super anxious already, and I just made it worse. So something to consider. Next up, exterior signage. So signage, I realize, is expensive. Signage has permits and limits, but I want to know that. I want to stretch my limit. If I can have a sign that's 10 feet long, at some point, assuming I have traffic, I'm going to maximize whatever my limit is, both on the building and on the road frontage. Some of you have building signage and you have the ability to put something out on the road. So take that into consideration. I know this is one of those ones where I know it's an investment. I know you might be limited, but at least be aware of what you can do. Take advantage, if you can take advantage of sandwich boards or pop-up signs. There's a food truck in town here, and it's got a great name. It's called Something Fishy, and it's a seafood food truck here in the coast of Maine. And it's in a parking lot, like a gravel parking lot, not a great part of town, but it's good parking, like good visibility. But the road that he's on, people are driving pretty fast, right? So if you're not local, you might not know where it is, right? Or you might not know it's there. So he's got this blow up fish, like, those squiggly guys that kind of move everywhere with the air. It's like that. It's got the air blowing up, and it's a fish. And when the air blows through it, when it's on, the fish has a little arm on it that kind of waves you into the direction of where that food truck is. Total eye catcher, right? Probably cost them $500, and it's plugged into an outlet. So things like that, again, if you are in an area where you have some traffic, take advantage of that stuff. On your entrance door, window decals. Many of you have hours and you close during the middle of the day, right? I know I used to. We used to be closed from like 11 to 3. Doors closed. I went home. No sessions, right? Or you're closed on Sundays, or you're only open half days on Saturdays. All justified, right? I'm not saying let's go extend hours. What I'm saying is, do you have somebody that is curious that swung by when the business was closed? Could you put a QR code on your door that they could scan to go to an opt-in? Is there at minimum contact info? And contact info nowadays, in my opinion, is how do I text you or how do I get to your social or web? And then I love this one. Many people have adopted this one. It's kind of been spread around the industry. We get a ton of compliments on this. This is a small decal right where they pull the door open. So this is geared more towards current clients. And it's a small decal, probably about the size of a piece of paper, like 8.5 by 11. And it's right where their hand goes to pull the handle. And it's all text, no logo, no nothing. It just says, you just did the hard part. We'll take it from here. Love that if you work with general population, because the hardest part is showing up, right? We know that. So that just confirms that every single time they walk in. We had one on our front door. We used to hear people rave about that in testimonials, reviews, love it. And it costs $10 on Vistaprint. And then a bonus one. I love this if you can do it. Coffee shop in town does this really, really well. Is you have speakers inside. Can you put a speaker outside so that they start to get the energy as soon as they get out of the car? Right? They start to feel good. You're the best part of their day. We know music's a big part of it. If it's loud, I would totally put one of my speakers, same music that's playing inside, I would have it play outside. Love that. Love that, love that, love that to kick things off as they walk in. All right, so now they've walked in. Let's move to the lobby. So your lobby, again, clean, clean, clean. If you think it's clean, double that. I like separate flooring for your lobby. So I don't need, or I don't actually encourage like a completely separate lobby, like walled off. I think that's hard in a training gym for sight lines since we're not always staffed at the front. But I do want flooring, and we'll talk about this in the gym in a minute as well. Flooring is a phenomenal way to separate things because the human eye sees it as a separate area, even though there's no wall. So typically like a vinyl plank, the stuff that you would buy at Home Depot, the click together stuff. Nowadays, that's solid enough. It's got commercial grade warranties to it, waterproof. So for those of you that are dealing with like snow and mud and rain, can handle the commercial foot traffic. But I typically want a separate flooring, not my rubber, in the lobby. For your front desk, I would consider, and I got this originally from the banking world. So if you look at the banks that have stood out, a lot of the banks nowadays they saw a massive drop, obviously, of foot traffic because 90% of things can be done online. So why do I need to come into the branch? But they also know that if you're going to like buy something, if you're going to upgrade, if you're going to open up a new account, you're going to take out a mortgage, you're going to do something, you're going to have to come into the space. And they wanted to make it as inviting as possible. Car dealerships did this too. And they got away from the closed off, bring you into a room or kind of cubicle type setup and more to just a standing workstation. And I think psychologically that feels more welcoming. It feels less intimidating and it feels more inviting to the consumer. So I'm a big fan for your front desk of getting rid of any closed off walls, getting rid of any, kind of traditional quote reception desk that kind of puts you behind them. And we actually use like a toolbox, right? If you just Google like workbench or a standing desk with storage, we actually got ours right from Home Depot. It looks like clean because it's metal. It's kind of got like a little bit of an industrial vibe to it. It's got tons of drawers like a toolbox would. So it works great for front desk. It's on wheels. So if we ever want to move it, we can move it. Some of them even have built-in outlets and they're like $500. And so it's a great front desk with storage, standing area, etc. And you really don't need much, as you all know, on your front desk other than maybe a tablet or a computer. Everything else should be stored. Nothing is worse. Nothing is somebody walks in, you bring them over to your desk and there's just paper and clutter everywhere. I don't want that. I want it clean. Think of how when you walk into an Apple, clean lines, clean displays, everything standing, etc. Next idea for you. And again, remember, these are all ideas here. Hopefully you can choose what you like and maybe what you don't like. The wallpaper for pictures or background. This has become pretty prevalent in our training gym world. And I like it. So what this is you just literally Google logo wallpaper. Comes in 2-foot rolls and it's your logo on wallpaper. And you use it as the backdrop in a wall in your lobby. I like that because many of you, and I would encourage you to be taking new client pictures. We'll talk about different ways we can do that in a minute. You may be doing testimonial videos, right? And you want a nice background. So it's kind of like that red carpet backdrop, but it's a wallpaper. So you don't have to worry about moving it. It's not going to look, flimsy. And it's relatively inexpensive, a couple $100. You can stick on wallpaper. Looks great. Love it as a background in the lobby. Hopefully this one's obvious, but I have learned as a coach in this space, in any space, as you all know with your clients, not everything is obvious. If it's obvious to you, doesn't mean it's obvious to everybody else. I definitely want a QR code or something I can tap with my phone right at the desk or right where clients are changing their shoes for people to leave a Google review. I personally like a TV in my lobby that is either like AirPlay or Chromecast display of a slideshow that shares client wins, upcoming announcements. Just think, the 2 to 5 minutes that clients are in your lobby before or after a session. Go back to your branding. I want that slide to look your brand. I'm working on, I didn't cover this in the beginning, but many of you know, if you follow me on social, we're opening up a second location. And from scratch, new construction. I'm buying the space, building it out, everything from scratch. And we're not rebranding, but I'm getting a lot of the branding updated. So things like your flyers and all that stuff all look the same. That my slideshow, my branding on that should match the same template as my flyers, as the gift cards that I'm going to drop off at local businesses, right? All of that looks cohesive. The words, the message might be different, but the aesthetic of it looks the same. Next idea for you. I love a day one client chalkboard. You can buy them right on Amazon. Just literally Google easel chalkboard. They're about, 10 by 20, right? They're not like the huge ones you would put outside, but they're, can be stood like on your front desk. And I love them because we would write every day, look if there's anybody new coming in for their first day, whether it's a new client coming in for a success session or Susie's coming in for her first workout. We would say, welcome to Sperling, and then just write their name on the chalkboard. How cool is that? Like, think of, you don't walk into Target and there's a chalkboard that says, welcome to Target, Doug. Like, that is super cool and so easy. So easy. And again, every day you're going to have to do it. Every day you're going to have to wipe it. It becomes monotonous. But remember, to that new client, that is their first day. And that there's only one day that can be their first day. So you can't screw it up. Next thing in your lobby, client spotlights. So these are client spotlights, pictures of clients, ideally out of the gym. So what we did is we just sent an email out, say, hey, we want to share your story. Send me a picture or a link to your social profile where I can pull a picture if you're cool with that. And a little blurb about you, who you are, how many kids you have, where you work, etc. And we printed them on what's called foam core. If you're not familiar with foam core is like a plastic board, almost like a PVC board. It's like a poster board, but it doesn't bend. So it's thick enough where you can hang it like a picture on a wall. And so we just got some double-sided Velcro. We built a whole wall in the gym of client spotlights. Now, I'll tell you what's very fascinating about that wall is, one, it's instant social proof for new people, right? Instant social proof for new people, because they walk in, and some of you might do assessments or success sessions during times where you're not running sessions. So the gym is quiet. So you have no social proof that you actually train people. But if you can point to this whole wall that says, hey, here's 20 of our, amazing clients and some stories about them, it's huge. And then other clients, when we talk about building community, other clients are walking past this wall every day, and they love reading the stories about other clients that go to the gym. So love a client spotlight wall. Different than a testimonial wall. Testimonials are typically like before and after pictures, or, speaking more to their training experience and their results. Those are cool too. Like, I have nothing against those, but this is like, a picture of Susie and, hi, my name's Susie Sperling and I've been a client for 5 years. I work at XYZ company. I have 2 kids and 3 grandkids. I love going on hike, blah, blah. It's a little blurb about them, right? Like their bio, essentially. All right, next idea in the lobby. Hair ties, gum, and mints. Hair ties, gum, and mints. I don't know who came up with this idea other than me. I started this years ago. I know several of our clients have adopted it. I think it's frankly just so easy. Like literally, we spend maybe $100 a year, $200 a year on Amazon. If you train predominantly women, I learned very quickly that in the middle of their workout, their hair ties break. They go to do their hair and they pull too hard and it breaks. And they're like, oh shit, I got long hair. I'm in the middle of my workout, so my hair's moving all over the place. I don't have a hair tie. So they're asking friends. So I picked up on that. I was like, well, those are cheap. Amazon bulk hair ties, black. So we literally have a bowl in the lobby of hair ties. Just grab one if you need it. Gum and mints. I'm not a gum chewer, but a lot of people are. And oddly, it seems like a lot of people are during their workout, which I find also weird. Also, think about your client, and many of them might be going to the gym and then going somewhere else immediately after, and their breath stinks, right? Like they know it, and they don't have anything to do about it. Like they don't want to go home and brush their teeth, but oh, cool, I'll just toss a mint in. So easy value add there. Love that in the lobby. You can never have enough greenery. I mean, don't go like crazy plant lady, but we're big fans of greenery, meaning, not your cheap, like Walmart plasticky looking plants, but you can go fake, just go like typically like a Home Goods. Amazon Wayfair has some decent stuff if you spend some decent money, like, I'm talking 50 to $100, not like 20. And you can get, whether it's like a ficus tree or olive tree or something like that, obviously fit your vibe. Scottsdale, Arizona versus, Southern Maine might have a slightly different greenery, but those do well on like, if you have like a shelf or you have a corner that kind of doesn't really have much. Greenery helps bring, I think, you see it a lot in like the yoga studios, right? I think they've done that very well. And people love it. It brings a nice aesthetic. It kind of smooths the kind of harsher look that a gym has out. All right, last thing in your lobby. And this one I put last because arguably you could also, if you didn't have room in your lobby, you could certainly do these in your gym instead, which is your chalkboards. Big fan of chalkboards. I want your chalkboards painted. You can just go to Home Depot or Lowe's and get chalkboard paint by the gallon, and you literally paint it on the wall like any other paint, and it instantly becomes a chalkboard. Be careful. I would recommend that you test if you are going to use a chalkboard marker and not just actual chalk. Test it first, because some of the markers do not erase well. You have to get. We always just use regular chalk. Some people do use the markers because they're cleaner, obviously, and they look a little nicer, but just make sure that they erase good enough. Not a fan of whiteboards. The reason why I'm not a fan of whiteboards is one, they tend to look like a little bit smudgier and messier. And most importantly, I'm taking pictures of the stuff, right? All this stuff is social content, right? My goals boards, my visit boards. We'll talk about what these are specifically in a second. But when I take a picture of a whiteboard, it's very glare. It has a ton of glare to it, very glossy. So it doesn't photograph well. Thus, we don't want it in our facility. So Frequent Sweaters board, if you're not familiar with the Frequent Sweaters Club, it's a club every month of people that showed up at least X number of times. You pick your number. Most people do 10. Some people do 8. Some people do 12. I like 10. Anybody that showed up at least 10 times in the month gets their name on the board. People will go crazy, and on the last day of the month, they will show up just to get their 10th workout. Erase it every month. New names next month. Lifetime visits. Love the lifetime visits. These are, how many total visits lifetime, and you build clubs. So like we had a 250 club, a 500 club, 1,000 club, things like that. And you get your name under that once you hit that milestone. We would pull the report once a month. So it's not like you're updating it every day. Once a month, you pull the report, note any, make any changes there. We have recently moved to away from a chalkboard with this and moved to our sign company, like our local sign company built something that is magnetized. So it's metal and everybody has their name on like a magnet. And that way we can just move it as they change levels. So you can do it different ways. But if you're on a budget, certainly start with chalkboard. And then the final chalkboard idea is I love a goals or wins board that is interactive, filled out by the client. So this is a blank chalkboard every month. And we have clients, as they leave a session or while they're waiting for the session to start, write down a goal that they have, or if they hit like a PR or a win that they had this month. It does take a little bit of like a pushing or nudging from the coach to say, hey, go write that on the board. Like, that's super cool. So it does take a little bit of an ear, but once people start filling it in, others will kind of follow. Okay. So there's about 10 ideas for you for the lobby. Let's move to bathroom. Then we'll get on to the actual training floor. Your bathrooms. This is where people measure cleanliness, right? Like, we know this. People measure the cleanliness of the entire space by how the bathroom is. So it needs to be super clean bathroom. Like, I should feel comfortable, as gross as it sounds, licking off the floor. That's how clean I want it. Super clean. And what helps with clean is clutter. And if this is not a strength of yours, find somebody on the team that is, and get them to own this. Because if it takes a certain personality, a certain attention to detail to care about cleaning, to care about, there's clean and then there's clean. And you want somebody on your team that is clean. And so what helps with this is less clutter, the better. I don't want a bunch of crap floating around that can collect dust. Good lighting and a mirror above the vanity. Again, detail that some gyms I've seen don't have. Good lighting so that if I need to touch up my makeup before I head into work, I can do so. A mirror so that before I leave the bathroom, I can make sure I look halfway decent. Greenery again. Hooks, or what's called a hall tree. Think of like if you have a mudroom where people put their coats and things like that. If you go on Wayfair and just Google hall trees, they're literally $100. They fit perfect in a bathroom. Basically, they're a bench with hooks above. So I can go in the bathroom and freshen up. I have a spot to sit, to change my shoes. I can put my bag there on the bench. If I'm changing for work, I can change there, hang my stuff. And then feminine products. I know for my men here listening in, this does not matter and you might forget about it, but we always had a basket in every bathroom that had feminine products, because some women don't pay attention and all of a sudden they look down and are like, shoot, I need a pad or a tampon, and they don't have one. And if you can save the day, you are amazing. So it's cheap. Again, just bulk on Amazon and have those there stocked in the bathrooms. And then last thing is, it's got to smell good, but I want a neutral scent. I'm not one of these people, but there are people out there that have very sensitive noses to certain smells. And so we want to be careful with like all the essential oils and all these different scents that are out there nowadays. I want something as neutral as possible. Typically, I would recommend like what they would call like a fresh linen, that before you get into like, I wouldn't touch like the lavenders and all that kind of stuff, because although you might think it smells good, the next person doesn't. Pick a very neutral scent, that clean scent, but not like, I hate to call it like a flavor, but I shouldn't be able to like taste the smell. Okay. All right, let's go on to the training floor. I've beat the drum of the cleanliness enough. My sales table. So I'm not a fan of office-based selling. What I mean by office-based selling is you bring somebody into a room to do your success session. That feels like a doctor's office and is pretty intimidating. I want it to be cafe style table, meaning 2 chairs like a coffee shop, 2 chairs and a table. The table ideally should be round, and I want it on the edge of the training floor. So depending upon your layout, and I'll show you a layout at the end here, the layout may be different, but I want them, remember, this is where you would do your initial meeting. I want them to be able to see if there's a session going on, or if I need to point to something that we're going to be doing in the gym, they can visually see it. Versus in an office, it's like, yeah, I'm going to be able to ask you about your goals, but you're not getting a true feeling of the gym. So I want my sales table in the gym, or like ideally on the edge of the lobby and the gym. All right, let's talk about your equipment selection. Everything, as much as possible, I want wall mounted. If you've been going at it long enough, you know the most valuable thing in our space is floor space. Many of you are presenting yourself in a uncluttered way just because you have so much stuff on the floor that could be wall mounted. I've walked into gyms and I've seen dumbbells on the floor in a row, kettlebells on the floor in a row, med balls on the floor. Even though they're clean and even though they're lined up, spend a couple $100 and get it wall mounted. Foam rollers, wall mounted. Med balls, wall mounted. My bands, color coded. We'll talk about color in a second, but color coded hooks. We would use electrical tape to show people. You can get electrical tape in any color. So if you have bands that are different colors, right? Let's say you have 5 different bands that you use and there's 5 different colors. I would go to Home Depot and I would build or buy a 5 hook system, and I would wrap the hook with a piece of electrical tape of that band color. And you will train your clients to make sure, and they will know to match the color. And if it can't be wall mounted, I want it to have a shelf. My dumbbells, my kettlebells, there is no reason nowadays that stuff should be on the floor. I want it on shelves. I already talked earlier, but if you missed it, every piece of equipment has multiple uses. Every piece of equipment has multiple uses. So anything that I am auditing in my space that does not have multiple uses, I am getting rid of it. Let's talk about the favorite color in our industry of black. Everything in this industry had the color black. Your plates were black. Your dumbbells were black. Your kettlebells were black. Your benches are black. Everything had the color black. And if we look at the training gym as a whole, again, my audience is training gym owners. I'm assuming if you're watching this, you are a training gym owner. You provide coaching. I know I'm stating the obvious, but let's take it the next layer. Most, and I'm going to speak in generalizations, most males are not as open to coaching as females. They have ego, they have history that they were, knew what to do. They don't have enough humility to admit that they now need help. If you do train a lot of males, they're traditionally older and they've grown up enough to say, I can ask for help. That is why you hear most training gym owners predominantly work with women. So why does that matter? Black, although clean when used right, too much of it can definitely present that like grungy, garage, industrial, intimidating type look. So nowadays with the equipment vendors out there, it used to be, if many of you that have been around a while know this, colors were never an option. Then colors became an option, but it was a massive price difference. So if I wanted to use a different color turf, or if I wanted to use a colored plate instead of a black plate, or if I wanted to have the pads on my benches be my brand color, it used to be like double the cost. Well, like everything, things have evolved, And largely speaking, there are exceptions, but largely speaking, it's usually a very minimal, if not at all, price difference. And sometimes, pro tip, you can negotiate this. I have negotiated it where the standard was a black bench, but I wanted a red pad because red was our brand color. So I was okay with the frame being black, but I wanted the pad to be red, which was an upcharge. And I said, hey, I'll buy 6 of them, but give me the red pads included. I always want to get as much of my equipment on brand. If it's not on brand, I'm going to ideally get it in a color because it's more energetic, it looks better in photos, etc. Best example of this is bumper plates or weight plates in general. If I have all black plates versus if my blues, my 45s are blues, my 25s are green, and my 10s are yellows, that presents a lot better. It's a less intimidating to a new person that doesn't know what that is. It also, pro tip, makes coaching a lot easier. Many of you have 20 medicine balls, and in a little circle it says 8 or 6 or 10. But if you spend a few extra bucks, you can get it so that the weights of the medicine balls, like the ball itself, is a different color. So the 6s are reds, the 8s are yellows. So as if I'm coaching a small group, I can say, hey, Susie, go grab a yellow ball. Rather than she's having to fluff around and look for an 8. Presents better, looks a lot better, love it, and love to spend. I don't love spending the money, but I love to have this be a differentiator. This will differentiate you from your CrossFits who are just buying the cheap all black stuff. Color coding also helps out on coaching. As I mentioned, kettlebells. You can buy kettlebells nowadays. Most of the manufacturers sell it where the handle has a color on it. So the bell itself is black, but each weight has a different color. So now as a consumer, it's much easier, much better experience if you can go to me and say, hey, Doug, go grab the purple, go grab the blue, rather than having to look around and try to read the thing that says 16 kilos. All right, my final one on color is turf. I'm in the middle of negotiating this right now with some vendors for our new space, but I will never put green turf in my space ever again. And I've had green turf, and I know many of you have green turf. Till the day I sold and got rid of that, or till the day I got rid of that green turf, I always, always, always had people ask, oh, you must work with kids. Oh, you must do sports performance. Pictures online. That must be a sports place. That must be CrossFit. And turf has for training gyms, to be clear, I'm a big fan of it. It has a lot of uses. I don't need to tell you that. What I am pushing you to do is to consider spending a few extra bucks and getting it in your brand colors. It will take it from are you a sports place to wow, that pops. Love it, love it, love it. And final thing on turf, if you can, for most programming philosophies, group training being the exception, but if you do a lot of lunges, sled pushes, farmer's carries, things like that, I'm a big fan of getting lanes rather than just one color. The pro of lanes is you can get multiple colors. So for example, I have a client whose colors are royal blue and black. And so he has 3 lanes, blue, black, blue. So it's one roll of turf, but it's 2 different colors, his brand. And now he's got lanes. So now when somebody's pushing a sled, they're not worried about the person also doing a farmer's carry getting crushed, because humans are humans and we follow rules. That's why roads have lines on them. So love, love, love lanes if you can. All right, let's talk about tech. In my opinion, just my opinion. You signed up to listen to my opinion. I would be getting rid of all paper and all whiteboards for my programming and warm-up displays. Everything is either a TV and or an iPad. TVs and iPads nowadays are a complete commodity. And I know it's money out of your pocket, but relatively speaking, it's cheap. So if I need to display something that doesn't change often, I will use a TV. For example, we had our clients do the same warm-up for the month. And so we just had it on a TV airplayed from a computer in the back office. It presents a lot better. You can put videos on it. You can get as fancy as you want. You can brand it to your colors. And then for your programming, again, I'm always sensitive. Like, for those of you that are my clients, I'm sure on here, thank you. But you all know this. I don't like to teach like, this is what you have to do. This is the app you have to use. This is, I don't like that, because there's multiple ways to do it. So certain apps, certain programming apps display better on iPads. So I'm not telling you that you need one particular programming app. There are better ones, in my opinion, in the marketplace than others. But all programming today, you'd have to make a strong case of why you should not display it on iPads for clients, right? It's easy. It eliminates the cell phone. I'm not a fan of clients doing their workouts on their cell phones. I think, especially if you work with Gen Pop, less I'm concerned about it with sports performance, because the kids are on their phones anyways and they enjoy it. Most adults, I don't know about you, but like, if I'm working out, I want this to be like my time. I don't want to be checking email. I don't want to be texting. I don't want to be burdened by all this other stuff. And so if you're making me bring my phone in, that's just like, I can't disconnect. The iPad is that separator. All right. Last thing, and I'll show you a floor plan. Let's talk about how you lay all this stuff out. So you make these strategic decisions and you lay it all out. Let's look at a floor plan. And secret, this is the floor plan for our new location. So I'm not a fan of equipment companies doing your floor plans until you've decided that's the piece of equipment you're going to buy. One, they take weeks to do it most of the time. Maybe they charge you for it, maybe they don't, but they also push pieces of equipment that, if you're gullible enough, you might buy and you don't need. I'm a fan of Canva because it's free and I can make it look like a modern day, for those of you that remember like Microsoft Paint, I like playing with it and it fits my brain. So bear with me. But I can do this at midnight while the equipment company takes me 2 weeks to get back to it. I can have a floor plan in my head by the morning. All right. So this is largely a floor plan for small group. I will give credit. I do think this is, for those of you that are familiar with the Alloy franchise, I do think this is something that Alloy has done really well, is their layout. I think it has I've taken good and bad from that. I looked at Orange Theory's layout. I looked at F45's layout. I've looked at, guys and gals that have had multiple locations, because when I say multiple, I mean like 5+, like true scalability of locations, and seen what they've done for layouts and taken the best of both. So again, layouts are tricky because the challenge with that is you may not have a rectangle. This space is 1,500 square feet. You may have 2,500 square feet. So you can't look at this, and say it's apples to apples, but you can take the general concept. So here's a kind of breakdown of the why behind layout. So down here is your entrance. You walk in the front door. There's my cafe table. There's no wall here. This is just straight sightline into the gym, right? Straight sightline into the gym. So my cafe table's here. Here's your benches, your cubbies, your coat hooks. There'll be a TV up above here. This is different color floor than the rubber, than the turf. Here's my front desk right here. Standalone front desk, and that's it. I don't want it cluttered. wallpaper in the back, and then I get to my space. This is my turf with my lanes, and all my equipment is in these pods. Now, what these pods look like, there are all different brands that do these pods nowadays. You can, take what you have. Maybe you add this as a wish list, but I want you to look at the general theme of mini gyms within a gym. So I know when I first designed my space 12 years ago, 13 years ago, I had all the dumbbells over here, and then all my TRX lined up over there, and then all my weights over in this corner, all my plates over in this corner, and then, all my medicine balls over here in this corner. So many of us program in a way where we're using multiple things at one time. Maybe we're doing a step up to a dumbbell bench press to a TRX row, and that's our tri-set. So all of a sudden, from a session flow perspective, I got to go walk over, grab a pair of dumbbells. Then I got to figure out where the TRX is mounted. I got to kind of do it close to there. So is there a bench there? Maybe I got to wheel a bench over. I might need 2 different weights. I might need a kettlebell. And so all of a sudden, I'm walking around the gym to get set up to do a tricep. And that is where your flow will break long term. It works when you're small. When you are at capacity, it will break. I want things. I think, many of us during COVID, we had to put people in these boxes and they couldn't leave the boxes, but all their equipment was right there. I try to look at that as what was the pro of that? The pro is the workouts were very efficient and people knew what they needed to have for equipment and they didn't have to worry about where it was. Con was I felt like I was in a dog kennel. So let's take the pros and get rid of the cons. So from a programming perspective, my vision with this is 2 clients would share one of these pods. So in this setup over here, they would have 6, there would be 6 clients, right? I have all my dumbbells, all my kettlebells, all my medicine balls, my TRX, benches against the walls there, right? So I could train 6 clients here, 2, 2, and 2. I have everything I need right there. Maybe I walk across if I need to do a carry. Maybe I walk across to the turf if I need to push a sled, do a walking lunge, things like that. If you really want to take it up a notch, this model will actually train 12 people. We'll just stagger sessions on the half hour. 6 will start here. They'll do all their strength stuff. They'll move over here to their bikes and conditioning in the last 15 minutes. While they're doing that, next session starting on their strength stuff. So again, I didn't want to spend a ton of time on the floor plan itself because I think that is so unique to each space and what that space limitations are. But take the idea that I want to reduce the amount of steps between equipment and I want to create mini gyms within my gym so that a client or 2 clients or 3 clients can have everything they need right there. And I don't have to spend a minute walking across the turf that interrupts somebody pushing a sled to go get that one piece of equipment to bring it back over here. Really pay attention to that, okay? So in sum, get clear on your brand colors, your ideal client, and your model. That dictates all of these decisions. Take this list, make a list of changes that you feel are realistic and feasible to you. Do it in phases, and I want constant change. Once a quarter, I'm changing my facility. I'm not flipping it I'm not flipping it on its head, changing everything, but I'm making one change. Maybe I'm painting a wall an accent color. Maybe I'm upgrading it to benches are all going to be brand colors this quarter. Every quarter, I'm showing the clients that I'm doing something new. Okay. So let me stop my share, and glad to see the share was good. For those on live, I can see the chat. So if you have questions, just drop them in the chat. And if you missed it in the beginning, while I'm waiting to see if there are questions, if you head to wealthygymowners.com/fix, wealthygymowners.com/fix. The comment should be pinned here with the link. You can grab the document that I had shared. And on wealthygymowners.com, you can also check out podcasts. We have a book that you can grab for free, all kinds of fun stuff there. So for the dozen of you or so that are on live, let me know in the chat what you have for questions or clarity on colors, layout, branding, any facility design stuff. Appreciate you sticking with it on a Friday. I know some of you had to go. Matt, good to see you on here. Calvin, good to see you on here. So my wall colors. All right. So let's talk about paint colors. So paint's an easy one to change the look of your facility. Okay. So let's talk about a couple things. Let's start with the top down. So let's first start with your ceiling. So a couple things with your ceiling. And again, I'm going to speak with like best case scenario. You then filter through what you can do realistically, both budget and with your lease arrangement. I like a dark ceiling because that hides all the crap that can be potentially up there in the ceiling. So if you're painting a ceiling, I want it dark. If you can, in your lease, you can negotiate if you have a drop ceiling, you can do a black drop ceiling. Lighting, I want to be like what I would consider to be warm lighting. I don't want like the hospital sterile LED, super like blue lighting, but I would like it ideally on a dimmer. I think that's yoga. The yoga studios do that very well. But I want a dark ceiling. Okay. And I want it clean and I want it as high as possible. Luke, actually, I think he had to jump, but Luke's going through a renovation right now in his space. He's one of our boardroom clients, and he ripped out the drop ceiling and is bringing it all the way up. Many of you have drop ceilings that are like 9 or 10 feet high. So your space looks kind of squished. And if you spent like 10 grand, I know that's a lot for some of you. So this is where I'm like speaking to the masses here. You could get permission, rip out that ceiling. You could add 5 feet to your ceiling, 6 feet to your ceiling. So from that standpoint, it's like massive difference. I know that's not paint color, but that's where I start. Okay. Now my walls, I want one primary color, which is typically a neutral. So look at your brand colors. Most of you might have like a white or a light gray or some type of neutral. I want that to be the primary color. And then most of you, go back to your brand colors, have a darker accent color. Maybe it's a navy blue, maybe it's a black, maybe it's a red, maybe it's a forest green, whatever. You have a dark primary color, right? That I want as an accent. So accents could be, I have a buddy whose colors are black and white. And so all of his walls are white, but 4 feet around, all the way around, 4 feet around, he painted black. So it's a two-tone wall. Serves two purposes: brand color, and you all know, scuffs against the wall. So love doing one primary color and then pick my brand colors and do either a two-tone or pick, like I've seen some gyms where their lobby is one color, like more of their primary darker color, and then the gym is the other color, or they have like their back accent wall as a different color. So yeah, you can mess around a lot with paint. Colin, thanks for being here. Good stuff. Dion, what are your recommendations for equipment pods? So there's tons of vendors out there. I don't have affiliates with any of them, so I will speak to no particular name. Well, actually, I won't have any downfall of saying names. So you have what I would consider to be the high-end pods. The high-end pods are companies like Torque, companies like Escape out of Europe, companies like Gym Racks, RAX, or their sister company begins with an A. I'm drawing a blank on it. Those are I know Luke's using gym racks. They look incredible, right? They look. Let me Google a picture. They look incredible. Very high end looking. You can have Active. That's their sister company. So those have all the what I want. So here's my wants, or sorry, my needs for a pod. I want the ability to hang a TRX, ideally 2, 1 on each side up top. I then want 4 to 5 shelves in those pods for my dumbbells, my kettlebells, my medicine balls, my sand bells. And ideally, I want hooks on the sides so I can hang my bands and any of that stuff, any of my accessory stuff. I don't know about you, but that pretty much covers like 80% of my equipment right there, tucked up nicely. 2 people share that. If I have semi-private 4 people, I got 2 pods, boom, 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 do my movement stuff behind me. I'm ready to rock. So I like those companies. I'm not using those companies. The reason why I'm not using those companies is because one, they don't do color. They do black or silver. Last time I checked anyways. And they're very expensive. Like, relatively speaking, for the average gym owner, for context, let me asterisk this. I'm opening up my second location as a lab. That's Project 500, by the way. That's our coaching program where we help gyms get to 500K. We have our boardroom group, which is for folks that are bigger than that. But for Project 500, I'm opening it literally as a lab to say, this is what I'm doing to build it to 500K. You follow. I don't think it's realistic to go spend. I mean, those pods, when I was quoting them, these are just kind of back of napkin numbers. I mean, they were like 10 grand a pop. So if you needed like 2 pods or 3 pods, you're talking, 30 grand. The average gym owner doesn't have that much money, and I don't want you to go into debt to get your equipment. So that's why I didn't go with them. Then you have brands like Perform Better, some of the CrossFit that have now merged into the functional training, like your Rep Fitness, your Rogue Fitness, your Get RX, Titan. All of those, they started as CrossFit brands and have kind of branched out from there. Those are more customizable, I feel, because they're from the CrossFit world, which actually was great with equipment. Not the look, it had a hardcore look, but from a functionality perspective, it was actually, they were the ones, to my knowledge, that created kind of that rig where you could train 6 people at once. Now, obviously, I think that has a certain feel that you'd have to be cautious of doing that with, but they have the color uprights, they have the shelves that you can do. So I would just get quotes from those ones and see what you have that fits your budget. All right. We are currently running large group up to 20 at a time, other than switching to semi-private. So, man, I don't think any of what I covered is model specific, other than maybe the pods at the very end. But like everything else, I don't care what model you run. Doesn't matter. All of that is applicable. I want it clean. I want it stored on the walls. I want TVs for display, not whiteboards. I want greenery. I want clean bathrooms. All of that matters. And in fact, I would say if you run group training, it matters even more because you are just like the Orange Theories. You are just like the F45s. So I think that is, it's huge to be able to stand out. And if you don't have a lobby, that's fine. Just, you don't need one. Like, I mean, is it necessary? No. But like, think about where do people come in and change their shoes and, all that stuff. Just make sure it looks clean, make sure it presents well, because your competitors do have a lobby that looks sexy. And I want it to look sexy. Cool. What else do we have, friends? I'll stick around if there's any other comments. 10 of you on here. Again, wealthygymowners.com. You can check out podcast, book. There's a case study in there, all that fun stuff. And then wealthygymowners.com/fix will get you the document from today's training. All right, my friends. That be it. Thanks for spending the last 90 minutes with me. Hopefully this was helpful. If you missed any of it, I believe if I set it up right, this should stay right up here on YouTube as a recording. So you can always rewind and check it out later. Appreciate it.